Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining and be in the traffic or weather. We'll get started and then if people come in as well, that will be great. So yeah, I'm Bethan Walters, so I'm representing the Sikh Human Rights Group for this year's UN Women CSW NGO for the 67th session. So the Sikh Human Rights Group is an NGO with UN consultative status, so it allows us to lobby at the United Nations and obviously be represented here. So the NGO focuses on different humanitarian, biodiverse, ideological challenges, so it looks at kind of basically trying to address this universalistic kind of attitude we have and trying to be more pluralistic with our language, especially at the UN, so trying to be more inclusive with who we talk to rather than looking at it through one lens and talking to one civilization. We'll talk to people from different genders, people from different religions, different cultures. I'm really just trying to challenge the kind of the hegemony that a lot of people are fighting. We are, not only kind of try to speak then on behalf of a small minority, which is what universalistic language tends to do, but we try to obviously include absolutely everyone in the conversation. So I'm sure you're wondering how this has come on to menstruation. So you are in the right room. So this is our parallel event on the innovation of menstruation. So as an NGO, we've been working on menstrual health in as many ways possible. In the last year, we saw the UN Human Rights Council hold their first ever panel on menstrual hygiene, human rights, and gender equality. We made a statement that was mostly to do with the language they use around menstruation. So we really tried to challenge, obviously, the term menstrual hygiene sometimes then reiterates the stigma and taboo attached to it. So again, going back to that pluralistic position is using more inclusive language. But we also try to address as well this luxury tax that still exists on menstrual products and obviously almost making it a choice that we menstruate. And because of the taboo and language that's attached to menstruation along with other things, that's why people feel less encouraged maybe to protest against it, but also, again, governments will still have this tax on these products. So yeah, that is kind of what we're trying to do at the United Nations level. This event, we've got incredible panelists and some who are stuck in traffic who will hopefully be able to join at some point. But we're going to examine how far we've come with technology that manipulates, that tracks, that suppresses our natural menstruation, while addressing the lack of funding, research, and even education into understanding our cycle and our body, diagnosing and treating issues such as endometriosis and PCOS, the sustainability of menstrual products. This panel will also aim to showcase the need for more funding for innovation in menstruation, such as ensuring menstrual products are available and accessible for all, they're toxin-free and sustainable, along with funding for menstrual health rather than just medication that suppresses the symptoms and neglects the cause. We will also discuss how innovation of menstruation has many barriers and has been selective. And at time we will look at or look further into innovation around the birth control and explore the pluralistic approach to innovation and how it looks different for everyone everywhere. So if you don't already know some of the people on the incredible panel, then hopefully you'll get to know them a little bit better over the next hour. But what we're going to start to look at is just how innovation looks different for everyone, depending on your kind of background and your circumstances. So I'm going to start with a panelist who is joining us virtually. So we've got Elisa Vitti here. So Elisa Vitti is a pioneer for female biohacking and is a woman's hormone and functional nutritionist expert. She is a 2-time best-selling author for Woman Code and In the Flow. She is the creator of the Cycle Syncing Method, a diet, fitness, and lifestyle program that is based on women's biological rhythms for optimal health, fitness, and proactivity. She is the femtech founder of flowliving.com, the world's first hormonal healthcare platform that helps women worldwide address their period, their fertility, and premenopausal issues naturally. Finally, Elisa is the creator of the My Flow Period app, the first and only functional medicine period tracking designed to help users eliminate symptoms and optimize their diet, fitness, and time management according to their cycle. It is consistently ranked in the top 10 paid apps in the health and fitness category on iTunes. She graduated from Johns Hopkins University and the Institute for Integrative nutrition. Elisa has been featured everywhere from New York Times to Vogue to Forbes, and has been a keynote speaker at TEDx and Summit. She advocates for gender inclusivity in research across medicine, fitness, nutrition, and nutritional studies, and transparent in media reporting, as well as training corporate teams on making workplaces more gender inclusive and effective based on biological rhythm awareness. So I will pass over to Elisa. I think there's just a lag.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Beth Ann, for such a lovely welcome. It's such a privilege and honor to be here, and I'm so excited to be sharing today. Can you all hear me okay? Hope so. I'm going to share my screen just to share a little bit more about why I'm so passionate about menstrual innovation and what we do at Flow Living. So let me pull that up. All right. So Flow Living is this company that I started 10 years ago, although I've been taking care of women's hormonal issues for 2 decades, probably a little bit more now. And, fundamentally, what we are is a digital health platform that helps women from their first period to their last recover from hormonal issues naturally with a proprietary macro and micronutrient form of therapeutics. And the reason why I started this company is very personal. I was a student at Johns Hopkins planning to become an OBGYN, and I started having all sorts of hormonal issues that were not being considered hormonal or really anything. And my doctors were just telling me that it was totally normal to have all of these issues. I was gaining weight, I was covered in acne, my cycle was completely dysregulated, and so many other symptoms. And it was really eye-opening to go through that experience, both as a patient, but also within the environment of one of the top medical institutions in the world. And I learned some really interesting things along the way. I learned that I was one of billions of women who were suffering from these types of issues, whether it be the issue that I had, which eventually was diagnosed as polycystic ovarian syndrome, or fibroids, or endometriosis, or perimenopause, or infertility. There are so many women. I was one of a multitude of women. And if that wasn't bad enough, that the traditional model of care isn't serving women with these issues. There's sort of this statistic that we now have that says it takes about an average of 7 years for a woman to get a diagnosis. And the journey is very circuitous, as was mine. I mean, I started having symptoms, I would say, as a young teenager, but the whole time I was being bounced around from different specialist to different specialist, and then eventually having to spend tremendous money out of pocket to still get nowhere. And at the end of this process, we're still at a place where this huge population of women will get to a place where even if they have a diagnosis, their treatment options are medication that doesn't cure them, potentially a surgery that does not totally resolve the issue, or, and this was the thing that really, I think, probably changed my life and my career, was hearing the word nothing, that there is nothing we can do. And I just found that to be really jarring, given that we live in the most technologically, medically, scientifically advanced moment in all of human history, that for over 50% of the population for whom 80% of women will suffer from a hormonal issue, there's maybe nothing that we can do. And then also that there are so many women who are suffering and spending money that they don't really have because they're not earning equal on the dollar to get symptom relief, but they're not getting it. So I've dedicated my career to researching, thought leadership, speaking, and bringing awareness to the fact that there are things, in fact, that women can do, but they just need the correct information and access. And of course, this is why I built flow living. So what we offer is a very accessible global form of personalized hormone care, a digital platform where women can fix their symptoms easily and resolve them naturally. And we do this via our app, which does a couple of special things around tracking symptoms, but also tracking lifestyle inputs around your functional medicine-based health inputs. We have our specific formulations for specific conditions that are evidence-backed and, therapeutically dosed. And that you're able to continuously track and optimize what it is that you're doing for your self-care, and that we can do that for you over 3 decades of your life where your hormones are constantly changing, right? Because that's the thing about hormones, they're dynamic, and so the care that they require also must match the biology. We have been taking care of women for a long time and getting results that aren't really happening anywhere else, from women who are in such significant menstrual pain that they can't go into work. They're now relieved of that pain. Women who are suffering with all sorts of physical issues that come up from, hormonal problems, from weight to acne, or mental health issues, those are resolved. Women who want to have children, who've been struggling, have children. And we do this for women around the world. I'm really proud to have been taking care of women now in every continent. Again, I always like to say, as long as there's an internet connection, we can help you. And that's important, that we've been able to reach women in places where the conversation has only just become more mainstream in the U.S., I would say, over the past 5 years, especially as I've been doing this for 2 decades. I can tell you it's not been the most embraced conversation, but in the past 5 or 6 years, it's become much more normalized. But I'm well aware in other parts of the world that this is not the case. And the fact that women can directly access support and get information discreetly is really something that we're very happy to be supporting. And as a second thing that I've done that I think has been helping the narrative a bit to bring some more positivity around the conversation is I created a methodology that supports a woman's cyclical pattern called the cycle syncing method. And it's a really interesting thing. It's once designed to be a health plan for women to navigate their hormonal balance, but it's also crossed over into the feminist narrative around, I want to put my female biology at the center of my life. And so this goes beyond just women who are struggling with their, period problems. It's sort of for every woman to get excited about taking care of her cycle and managing that. So that's what we do and why we do it. And like I said, really happy to be here today.
Thank you so much, Elisa. That was, it's quite obvious you have done some incredible work over the last 2 decades. So the next panelist we'll bring or speak to is Abby Epstein. So she is the director of the business of birth control. If you haven't already seen it, definitely watch it. She is passionate about empowering women with tools and education to make informed decisions about their reproductive health, from menstruation to menopause. She is a fierce advocate and fearless storyteller who has inspired countless women to question the status quo and ask for informed consent and listen to their intuition. For the past 20 years, Abby has joined forces with Ricky Lake to create 7 groundbreaking documentaries and a best-selling book focused on questioning and exposing the focuses of influencing women's opinions, access, and widely held assumptions about reproductive health. So I will pass over to Abby and kind of just tell us why you basically wanted to start this project.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Beth Ann. Pleasure to be here with this amazing panel of women. So the way that I guess I intersect with this panel, because I am not specifically working directly in menstrual innovation, like some of these others, but I am a storyteller and a filmmaker. And I started 15 years ago with a movie about midwifery and childbirth called The Business of Being Born. And that movie is still quite evergreen, sadly. It's sort of needed more than ever, looking at specifically the maternal health care crisis in this country, and how mothers and babies are not being served by the system. And so what brought me to the subject of birth control for my most recent film, which is called The Business of Birth Control, was the fact that, you know, and Elisa, who just spoke, is actually in the film and featured in the film, one of the brilliant experts in the movie. But it was really, you know, to amplify this narrative that I think a lot of times when you're talking about reproductive justice or reproductive rights, right? You're mostly really thinking about maybe access to abortion, maybe access to birth control, maybe menstrual equity, health equity. And I think what's interesting in the way this intersects is that what my film talks about is really that sort of flip side of the birth control industry. And if you understand how hormonal birth control works, it is essentially menstrual suppression. So that's how it works. It stops ovulation, it turns off the menstrual cycle. And as Elisa was saying, one of the reasons that, you know, when you have certain hormonal health issues like PCOS and you seek treatment and they say, well, there's nothing we can do, really the solution is birth control. And so there's a huge percentage of women who are put on hormonal birth control as really the only quote unquote solution for their hormonal imbalances or their reproductive health issues or any kind of, you know, menstrual cycle issues. And it's not treatment, it's not care that's addressing root cause. It's a Band-Aid solution, it's symptom suppression. And really, I think the proliferation of using birth control without really carefully looking at the side effects and at the same time looking for real solutions to these issues has been at the detriment of women. So the film has really, I think, struck a chord, especially with younger women who are coming of age at a time where they're actually being taught about endocrine disrupting chemicals. They actually, you know, they don't want to put synthetic hormones in their bodies. And they're also, you know, as we're going to talk about today, really embracing the menstrual cycle, more centering their life and in the menstrual cycle, and are interested in talking about it. And a lot of what hormonal birth control does, as I said, is really just shuts the cycle down completely. And so it's a, you know, super interesting time, I think, for everybody in this area or in the femtech area, as we, I think, are sort of on a bridge where we are trying to more center female and female identifying biology and, you know, really look for new solutions of how we can address all of these issues, I think, from menstruation through, you know, contraception in more innovative ways. So The Business of Birth Control, you can find it. It's on Amazon. It's on thebusinessofbirthcontrol.com. We just did a free screening this weekend in honor of International Women's Day. So we put the film on for free, and we had 10,000 people sign up to watch the film, over 10,000 people. So it's a, you know, really, really popular subject. And we had a wonderful talk back yesterday with a men's group called Men for Equity and Reproductive Justice. And it was a fantastic conversation led by men talking about how can men enter this space as well. So I'm just really excited about everything I'm seeing, and really happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Abby. And yes, do watch the film. It's very, very eye-opening. Yes. Okay, so the next person we'll move on to is Dr. Olivia Arns. So she is the co-founder of Floosh. Floosh was created to remove permanent waste from your bathroom and our planet with microplastic-free flushable period products. So Olivia trained at Imperial College London as a doctor and founded Flush in her final year at Imperial with her co-founder, who is a biomedical and design engineer. Olivia worked for the NHS for 2 years and has continued to develop Femtech, the material technology behind Flush, the flushable menstrual pad. In 2009, Olivia went full-time into Flush, and since then has been the innovator in 2 global patent families, awarded the NatWest Chairman's Award, the London Mayor's Entrepreneur, and the MSD UK's Innovator of the Year, and raised over $12 million in funding for Flush. Olivia is passionate about refocusing the conversation of burden of sustainability away from the shoulders of the individual consumer and back in the hands of corporations, designing, developing, and selling products that make permanent waste. So, Olivia, I'd like you to introduce Flush a bit more, but also tell us why you created the product.
Has been left in your hands as you finish using the product, wondering, okay, now what do I do with it? Do I put it into the bin? How do I compost this? And how do I get rid of it sustainably? And when there's no choice in menstruating every single month, and there is no choice in what types of products there are on the market, that is where I believe that we need to start this conversation. With Fluss, the real reason behind going for flushability was because we did start looking at the biodegradable. So right now, when we compare ourselves against other, for example, traditional plastic products on the market, they would, after going into the bin, would land and sit around in landfill for about 500 years. Even biodegradable products, which are compared against it, can biodegrade, but it is uncertain in terms of the concentration of anaerobic and aerobic bacteria, the temperature, the humidity that you're exposed to within landfill. And then the gases that are released, the methane and the carbon dioxide, are released straight into the atmosphere without any filtration. So therein lies a real issue there, because there isn't simply such a substitution of materials. There needs to be an understanding about the end of life and the processing of that. With flushability, we allow it to use existing infrastructure to pipe it away hygienically out of your bathroom, get traveling to your local water treatment center, where it then gets degraded into 3 things. So biogas, which goes into renewable energy, biosolids, which is then used for fertilizer, and then water. All of this using completely microplastic-free products and a process, which is a big part of what we believe. So as part of this, for the consumer, for you, I really want to enable you to have a more convenient and a more instinctive way of disposing. In the same way that you get rid of your toilet paper and any other sort of soiled products down the toilet, why should it not be also that the companies create and design products that are developed for you as the user, but also thinking of the environment that you're in when you're disposing of them? Right now, we are only 2 months into launch into the UK. We are looking to come into the US soon, as well as other places in Europe, India, Indonesia, and China. So please keep this place posted. For me, this conversation and this talk about innovation in menstruation, as I think, is highly important. Understanding and for me learning about the challenges faced across different areas of the world. For me, having developed this product within the UK ecosystem, but also looking at the infrastructure globally, would really help me understand and learn about what are the different challenges that menstruators across the world are going through. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Olivia. And yeah, I have used the product, so do get them if you can. We also will hand them out at the end so you can try. So our next panelist, again in the menstrual pad kind of world, we've got Kristin Kagetsu. So Kristin is one of the co-founders of Safi Pads. So Kristin is passionate for sustainable manufacturing in women's issues. As an undergrad, she worked on multiple projects, including plastic bottle recycling, waste management, and natural product development. with the MIT Design Lab in Brazil and in India. Her first product launch was to set natural dye crayons that she developed with an NGO. Since its founding, Sathi has been recognized globally by Times Magazine, Fast Company, Business Insider, UN Environmental Program, the UN IDO, Vogue, as well as many other magazines. And for its social impact, innovation, and sustainability is what it's been kind of mostly recognized for. She has spoken at the New York Times Climate Hub, at COP26, at the World Economic Forum. She is the MIT Lab Sales Up Fellow, the Asian Society Young Leader, the Game Changer Award recipient, the TEDx speaker, the Forbes 30 under 30 Asia Fellow, and many others. So I will pass over to Kristen to, again, kind of explain why you created the product and a little bit about Sathi pads.
Hi, everyone. So, hello.
Just bring it real close.
Hello? Yeah. So, I just wanted to share a couple facts from the UN and a couple others. So, this is kind of showing UN SDG 12 and India, some overlapping facts between the two. One of the central fact is that only 15% of urban waste gets processed. And then on top of that, if we're looking at pad waste, so I guess Olivia already mentioned, but basically some of the key factors are that regular pads are made mainly of plastic, and we also have a lot of disposable waste. So we started Sathi in order to address a couple different issues. Environmental issue is one of them, but really it was the lack of access. So in India, only 36% of women currently have access to sanitary pads, and this is one of the main reasons why we started Sathi. At the same time, a lot of those women are in rural areas, and so there isn't waste infrastructure to handle the regular plastic pads. So we thought about trying to provide access to affordable menstrual products, but then also what would happen after the products are being used. So what can we do that would kind of engage that environment? So at the kind of in a similar mindset, we looked into actually compostable products, because in the village area there already are local kind of community level composting happening, and also in some villages there's also bio-toilets, and so it kind of made a lot of sense in that ecosystem to have a biodegradable and compostable option. And we found that also in cities women were interested in this option as well, because it's more of a eco-friendly option. So yeah, so next, sorry. So we're able to do this with proprietary technology to convert agri-waste fibers into an absorbent. So we make our products with banana fiber and bamboo fiber. So we're using local agri-waste materials in order to make the product. And our business model is developed to be quite circular. So circular both in the environmental sense, but also in the impact sense. So we start with agri-waste material. That means we're able to provide additional income to the farmers that we work with. We have an all-women staff in our manufacturing unit, and then we are making the product and selling that in urban areas, but also distributing in rural areas. So we're trying to have as much positive impact as possible, both on the kind of community level, but also and health level, but also on the environmental level. This is just a quick slideshow of some of the impacts that we've had. So we can just go through some of the facts and how they match up to the UN SDGs. And just one last note is that when we started Sathi, we also started our 1 million pads initiative, and we were really looking forward to how we can distribute as many pads as possible to women in underserved areas. And as of last year, we completed that initiative. So now we've launched our 10 million pads initiative. So we're aiming to provide these products to as many women as possible. We're starting in India and then hoping to expand beyond that, but we're trying to provide an experience that's eco-friendly, period.
Great, thank you so much. So our next panelist, again, sticking to the pads, but slightly different. We've got Dr. Sarah Nazari. So she's the CEO and co-founder of the women's health company Quinn. Quinn is a women's health service focused on the potential of menstrual blood for health monitoring and early diagnosis for women globally. Dr. Nazari graduated from a medical school in Denmark and has worked several years at Stanford OBGYN, where she has conducted research into women's health. Dr. Nazari was a part of the advisory group for the Danish Minister of Education, helping plan the Danish education system to ensure students become the best creators using digital technologies. She was a speaker at TEDx, again, Copenhagen, on failure is experience and experience is learning. In 2013, she was nominated as Denmark's Female Entrepreneur of the Year, a prize that is given to a woman who has successfully taken on challenges in otherwise male-dominated industries, who has served as role models for other women. Dr. Nazari aspirations has always been to further research and applicable medical solutions that matter to people, which help improve health standards worldwide. So I'll pass over to Sarah and to tell us, why you started Quinn, what was the need for it, and how it's going.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Beth, and for organizing this panel. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. I've always been very passionate about women's health, in part perhaps because it's been sort of, as part of the healthcare system, it's been very overlooked. Not just in terms of care, but also in terms of representation and participation in medical research. And on top of that, I spent 7 years being trained in a very reactive healthcare system, being taught how to recognize patterns, coupling those to diagnoses, and then prescribing drugs or treatments. Very little time spent on preventative care. So prevention is something that's always been very important to me. And in order to be preventative, we really need information about what's going on in our bodies when we are outside the doctor's office. And we've seen this amazing explosion in medical devices and products trying to provide information about what's going on. We can track our steps, our pulse, our sweat, our sleep, all kinds of things, which is really, it's great, but not always very clinically relevant. So when starting Quinn, I really wanted to figure out how we could give information about our bodies outside the doctor's office regularly that really had clinical utility. And because blood is the most commonly used bodily fluid for diagnostics, it really became a question about how do we get access to blood non-invasively, regularly, conveniently. And one day it sort of hit me, well, half of the world bleed every month. Why has nobody looked at that? And that's sort of what led me to start Quinn. Quinn means, the word means woman in Danish, because both me and my co-founder Soren are from Denmark. And we've created a product, we call it the Q-pad. It's up there, right? So it's a modified menstrual pad built on organic cotton and paper, frankly, so very accessible. A woman uses it like she uses any other pad. Once she's done collecting, she pulls a little, so this is what it looks like. It has an oval printed on it, so very easy to see. You know, once the oval is covered, you know you've collected enough for us to run screening on you. Then you pull this little tab, which removes a small collection device. You throw the pad away like you would with any other pad, but this is really where we collect a small volume of blood that enable us to run different testing. You place the strip into a small container, you throw that in the mailbox, and about a week later you get information on important health markers that you sort of can track over time and see how your healthcare is changing. So I think, Jordan, if you go to the next slide. One of the big applications that we're really excited about is cervical cancer screening. It's certainly a global problem. It kills 350,000 women globally. It is the second most common reason for death, cancer-related death, among women, especially in sort of when we think about the global application here. And we've been able to show that the Q-pad actually is able to screen for cervical cancer. So it's a very accessible way to really sort of solve this cancer, especially given that this is a cancer that is entirely preventable. It is about access to screening. And if we were able to screen every woman today, cervical cancer would not be a thing tomorrow. So with that in mind, we published very recently, I think one slide back, Jordan. Thank you. Very recently, in August of last year, we published our first data set with Stanford University Hospital. And we were able to show that the Q-pad does screen very accurately for cervical cancer, and very interestingly, actually also picks up more cases early. So we're very excited about this application area. We just recently got FDA approval in Southeast Asia, and yeah, very honored to be able to provide this solution for women in this region where there is really a need for screening. Other than that, we've also learned that the QPAD and menstrual blood really has a very wide set of information about women's health that could really make a difference. And it ranges from, diabetes screening, nutrition screening, anemia, thyroid health, STDs. And so it's really an interesting, way to look at menstruation that hasn't been discovered before. When we started the company, there was one paper published on the proteomics of menstrual blood. One. This was published in 2012. It's actually what brought me to New York the very first time, because shockingly, the paper was published by the forensic department in New York. So you might ask yourself, why was the forensic department looking at the proteomics of menstrual blood? And it actually turns out that there was a murder case where the suspect said the dried blood on this couch is menstrual blood, and we had no way to prove right or wrong, which led to the first paper being published. And we've sort of since then built on top of that research and looked at how menstrual blood could become a very accessible way for women to get access to care and health screening. So these are some of the assays that we validated. And yes, we have an app that goes along with that really makes it possible for women to track. We care less about your value today, but really what matters is how it's changing over time. And that's the kind of information that we need in order for us to be preventative about our healthcare and take care of ourselves. Yeah, and then perhaps a little bit about what menstrual blood is, because as a woman and as a doctor, I was shocked that this was actually not something that had been looked at very much. But menstrual blood is a really unique bodily fluid. Not only does it give us access to systemic blood, so what you would find in normal venipuncture when you stick a needle in your arm and you draw blood, but actually you also have access to endometrial tissue and vaginal fluid, and with that a little bit less than 400 unique proteins that tells us information specifically about the reproductive organ. So there's really tremendous opportunity here when it comes to enhancing women's health, something that we really do need to focus on, I believe, given how it's been overlooked sort of historically. Oh, next slide. Yeah, so finally, we do give out these kits for free. We really hope to have more women participate in research. It's really important that when we do clinical trials, that we make sure that women are represented, and all kinds of women, minorities and whatnot, especially women who may not today feel seen by the healthcare system, right? So this is a QR code where if you scan it, we'll send you a kit for free, and we'll share 5 different clinically relevant biomarkers with you that you can sort of look at over time. And of course, would love your feedback at the end of the day. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I hope you can agree. It's, quite the revolution. So yeah, hopefully you all kind of get that. Yeah, it deserves a clap.
Thank you very much.
I've also realized everyone has spoken at TEDx pretty much on this panel. So yeah, congrats to that. So our finally but not least, our last panelist is Gurmeet Sadi. So she is a journalist who has worked with various NGOs and organizations in the United States and across the globe to promote women's empowerment through media and social media and networking. She has helped women suffering from domestic violence and other issues and helped raise awareness for different causes by educating and doing seminars in local gurdwaras, aka like Sikh houses of worship. Okay. And throughout her own talk show as well. She's become involved in the Pinguar Charitable Trust in 2011. While making documentary while filming the Pinguara, she has helped raise funds for the trust internationally to assist with their work. She has won awards for her documentary about Pinguara and brought awareness for their work to international platforms. Pinguara is a non-profit organization with its headquarters in India and 7 other locations throughout India. Pinguara helps individuals from all walks of life, from newborns to seniors, who are either orphans, disabled, terminally ill, or abandoned by their families and society. Pinguara has schools, nurseries, living facilities, hospitals, artificial limb centers, and many other facilities to help people however they can. Gurmeet advocates for gender equality internationally and is recognized as one of the most powerful Sikhs in the world for her work and is inducted into the Hall of Fame in London. She is also known for her political and journalistic work and has traveled as a part of the White House Press Corps to India when President Barack Obama visited in 2015. So I will pass over to Gurmeet to talk a bit more about Pinguar Trust, but also to kind of give us a perspective from kind of their menstrual, the work you do there, and kind of given us idea in terms of, you know, for instance, if they wanted to track their periods, is that an option? But also to understand actually what access do you have to products and education with where you work. Sure. Hello? Yeah,
Is
just
this on?
nice and loud.
It's
Yeah.
on, okay.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Beth Ann, for having us here. And for also thank you so much to Sikh human rights groups for organizing this and bringing this topic and the awareness for women's menstruation to a bigger market and bringing the awareness to this topic. I've been involved with Pingalwada Trust, Charitable Trust, since 2011 when I went there to make a documentary. I went there just as one of the organizations that was doing a lot for the community, not realizing what I was really walking into to see what that organization's all about. And when I went there, it was supposed to be a one-day documentary shoots, ended up being almost a 4-day stay because there wasn't enough time to cover everything, the work that they were doing. As far as, they have people from all walks of life there. There are orphans from newborns who are left at the door, at the gates of Pingalwada, to senior citizens, some who even are abandoned by their family. They have family, but the families don't want them because either they're handicapped or there are challenges that the family can't help with. So they just leave them for Pingalwada to deal with it. And Pingalwada embraces these people without question, without looking at their gender or their religion. They take care of these people, especially women, which is really sad when you go there and see the kind of conditions that some of these women are brought in. When I was there, and I was there actually 2 weeks ago also, there are women who are brought in from the streets. Some women are just mentally challenged or handicapped who can't take care of themselves. They don't even realize that they're being sexually abused by men out there on the streets. And they have no idea, let alone taking care of, their personal hygiene. They don't even know how to take care of their regular hygiene at all. And one of the women who had come into Pingalwada was a woman who was so badly infected because of the diseases she had. She actually had maggots in her vagina. And she didn't even know that she had them because she was mentally challenged. So when they brought her there, they did full examination on her. They took care of her, treated her, and in one of the pictures that we just ran on the slides, she's in there where it shows the before and after of who she is now, what she was brought in as, and what she looks like now. And these women, one of the questions you asked, Beth Ann, is if they have phones or if they have access to education of menstruation. They don't, because they really are not capable of these things. They don't know if they're bleeding monthly, if they're not bleeding monthly. They have no idea about these things. And Pingalwada takes care of everything for them. They have access to menstruation products through what Pingalwada provides for them to take care of themselves. But at the same time, when they come in, most of these women they don't know, what they ate in the morning or an hour ago. So there's actually staff there that monitors the women's menstrual cycles. They write it down and then they take care of it. They keep a running calendar for the entire staff of these women. And they're not, there are young kids there, there are young teenage girls there are middle-aged women, and of course, much older women. So they keep track of all the women who are going to be going into menstruation or who are currently in menstruation. And how do you deal with these women even post-menopause? Like, how do you prepare them for these, that their body's going through changes, and how to educate them about it? It's not easy. It's really a challenge for them. And people from all over the world, doctors, psychiatrists, they all come in to help these women, to, whatever time they can give back to these women to educate them and help them in any way they can. But Pingalwada pretty much takes care of all their hygiene and, and to help them understand or to just take care of their their own bodies.
Thank you so much. Yeah, incredible work that you're doing. I think, yeah, again, a round of applause. I think as well, what you've probably seen from the panelists and kind of just their walks of life, we've already seen how innovation looks different for everyone. Depends on where you've been brought up, kind of your circumstances, your economic background, you know, what schools you've been able to go to, etc. So I think hopefully as the conversation goes on, we will really develop that. And this need for kind of more of a pluralistic approach, you know, really reaching out to everyone. It doesn't matter kind of trying to fit a certain lens, but actually talking to all of these different people and understanding what your access is and hopefully just educating and empower everyone. So we're going to move on now. So Abby will be the kind of next person. I don't know if the mics you just want to kind of pass around, like pulling out the thing. But Abby, so why do you think there has been more funding and innovation into birth control for people who menstruate compared to the people who are fertile every single day of their life, pretty much?
Yeah, you know, I think with the funding, what I've observed in making my documentary is that, you know, there's the whole piece that we're talking about here, which is really, I think, a lot about marketing. So it's marketing to women either through pharmaceutical companies or, you know, like we talked about, you know, even if you look at like some of the older Tampax traditional menstrual product ads, right? I mean, the marketing is basically saying, this is something you should hide. Like, you can use our product and you can wear tight white pants and jump around and play tennis. Nobody wants to play tennis on the first day of their period or wear tight white pants. But I think, you know, the marketing is very much, right? And it's, I think, very much the same with birth control. It's very much about kind of this, like, you know, repression of female biology and like you should live in sort of masculine rhythms and a masculine cycle. So where male hormones are pretty much the same, you know, every single day. That's sort of the cycle that I think women are pushed into. So if you're like on the birth control pill, oh my God, how convenient, right? Because it's all about work, work, work. You can work, you don't have to have a baby, you don't have to have this period, you don't have to ovulate, just, you know, flatline. And so I think that you're not going to really see, right? And so you have these huge markets, right? These are really, really big markets. I mean, like what like these women are doing here in the menstrual space is just, it's extraordinary, but it's revolutionary, it's breakthrough, right? This is like the first time that we're taking care and thought and thinking about waste and menstrual blood and, you know, it's, you could barely have this conversation. So I think overall, when you look at, you know, who's monopolized the way these messages are being sent to women about their bodies, and you look at the billions of dollars, right, that are already in this market of selling contraceptives, for example, there isn't really much motivation, you know, let's say, to do research around like the things Elisa Vitti was talking about at the beginning. You know, well, who's going to do, you know, this around herbs or dietary intervention or hormone balancing or, you know, there has been very little thought about, you know, what it really means to have a period and, you know, how to optimize that. And I think because of the money being made in other sectors, there's just, you know, there's very little appetite. But I think now what we're seeing is things are changing, you know, and as Olivia was saying, I mean, you know, I think women do care. Women do think about now, how can I be the most, you know, ecological member of the world? Like, how can I participate in climate justice? And you know, I do think about where my pad or where my tampon is being flushed. It is changing. So I think if we create that market, right? If we create that market of the next generation who is like, no, I actually don't want to be on hormonal birth control. I do want to have a cycle and, you know, I want to optimize my cycle and feel good on my cycle and receive all the benefits, right? They're huge benefits, actually, health-wise, of having a menstrual cycle. Then I think we can maybe start to see a shift you know, when the market starts to see, oh, well, there might be some money there, you know, because maybe there is like a whole new generation that, you know, wants to live in, you know, more of a hormonally based rhythm of life. So I think that's the shift that has to happen. But as you'll see, if you see my documentary, it's difficult, right? Because most women, if you even talk about all the millions of women, let's say, that are taking oral contraceptive pill, they don't even understand how it works. I'm talking about women in their 20s, 30s, 40s. They've been on these drugs for maybe 2 decades. And you actually ask them, do you know how this works? They actually have no idea. And they will say to you, but I went on it because it regulates my cycle. And they're shocked when you tell them, no, it is not regulating your cycle. You don't have a cycle. That's not a cycle. What's happening when you have a bleed on your pill pack is it's a withdrawal bleed. It's when you stop taking, you know, the synthetic hormones and you have what's called a withdrawal bleed. It's not a menstrual bleed, there's no ovulation. And they're really shocked. And they kind of feel almost betrayed, like, well, what do you mean? I thought this was regulating my period. So when you have that level of like basic disinformation, then it's very hard to move forward from there. Because how do you know that, you know, a natural menstrual cycle is something you might want to even preserve if you don't even understand how it works, what the drugs are doing, and then again, what are the benefits? Because, you know, we've been marketed to the fact that like, this is an inconvenience, it's messy, and you should hide it, and you should wear white pants, and you should use these very secretive products so that like nobody knows this is happening. So, you know, it's very hard to then, how do you kind of embrace that? So, yeah, I think that's kind of like a long roundabout answer to your question.
You. Well, yeah, no, you brought the next question in really nicely. You mentioned about marketing. So I'm going to go to the pad ladies in the middle, where you can kind of, I guess, share this answer a bit. But menstrual products have been around for as long as we can kind of remember. But, you know, for instance, the brands Always and Tampax, they've kind of become the generic terms we associate with our periods. And I know in the UK, they actually determine what we learn. And when it comes to menstruation, they're very involved in like the educational side of things. So how do you, you know, start challenging these massive competitors? Because again, you know, they don't have the organic cotton, they aren't environmentally friendly, they aren't giving us an insight into our health. So how do you challenge that? I don't know who wants to start.
I'm happy to say a few words about that. I think when you look at some of these big brands that have dominated the feminine hygiene space for, I mean, decades now, and you think about kind of how have they looked at periods, not just as a taboo, but frankly as a waste product, right? Something you throw away. And I think the way that we at Quinn look at menstruation and periods is very much the opposite. We look at menstruation and period blood, frankly, as an opportunity for women to get access to information about their bodies. And that is really, we hope that will help change the conversation from it being shameful, a waste product, a stigma, to something that women can really look at as a unique window of opportunity to gain insights about their health. You look at how, you talked about marketing as well, how these brands have marketed, you know, menstruation, and it's colored blue or green or pink, not really sort of just as it is. It's blood, it's red, and frankly, it is very similar to what you would draw from an arm. And so really, I think it comes from, it's about education, it's about, I think for once, really just talking about it for what it is, and acknowledging that this is not a shameful thing, it's a natural thing, and I really think, you know, an opportunity for women's health. And I think that's how we look at it differently, and hope to kind of distinguish ourselves in that way.
I think also for us, one of the issues that we wanted to address was lack of access to menstrual products in particularly underserved areas in India. And there's many consequences for not having access to menstrual products. One of those is definitely using potentially unhygienic alternatives that can cause more infections and irritation, and potentially, many other health consequences. But also, the other thing is kind of thinking of what does that impact have on day-to-day life. So if you don't have access to menstrual products, you might stay home. If you're a girl and you stay home from school 5 days or a month, you'll miss out on a lot of school, and then your parents might say, well, now there's no chance to catch up, so let's take you out of school. So there's a lot of dropouts during the year, and then for work also, if you miss a certain number of days every month, then you know, your employer might say, okay, you know, this is not going to work out for us. So I think that's another issue that we were looking at, and seeing how we can kind of bring access, but also talk about the basics of how does menstruation work, how do we use these products instead to create a better environment.
Just to quickly finish on the marketing that I've been dwelling on, Bethan, is I really believe that it's been underpinned by two quite subtle but really important pillars. And I think the first one is language, and the second one is the measuring scale that these large corporations put. With language, it becomes so subtle and it becomes so ingrained within our conversation that even when you look at it, a pack of products, they're called sanitary pads. There's nothing unsanitary about menstrual blood. But even when you look at a menstrual bin, it's called a sanitary bin. And I think with these subtle sort of nuances, even in a UK sort of grocery store, when you go down and try and look for period products, you have to look for this sort of clues that will take you there, like feminine hygiene products or monthly products. And I'm like, why can't we just say period products? And this sort of, like you say, there's this discretion and secrecy that clouds menstruation, which sort of builds the taboo around it. And this is further exacerbated by any further lack of regulation around the language around that. So you can call a product organic when less than 5% of the product could be organic, when just the top sheet is. And you don't even need to talk about the construction adhesive that's made of acrylic glue that's causing all of these allergic reactions and all of these itching and rashing. Why does it feel so uncomfortable and humid? There's so much this lack of transparency with this language that these corporations have built up. In the UK, one brand, so the Always brand, is 53% of the UK market share. So when one company holds over half, a chokehold of the market, the language sort of follows that. And therefore, they also set the second thing, which is how they measure what success is. How does Always and Tampax tell you what their best product is? Oh, it's super absorbent. Well, what about the other qualities? What about the environment? What about diagnostics? What about access? What about what about pain? Why are we not discussing about all of these different qualities that we should be addressing within period products? And why are we just talking about the one thing, which is the only thing that these corporations have any sort of handle on, because that's what they've been continuing to push as innovation. I think the last real innovation that we've seen put out by these companies was when they added wings to the product about 50 years ago. And in the last 10 years, we've seen a massive boom in education around this. I think when Ida Tin first coined the term femtech, when I started going out fundraising, people correct me to be like, I'm sorry, did you mean fintech? And I think within the last sort of 10, 15 years, we've seen this sort of boost of CBD products, diagnostics, accessibility. And I think as we challenge them, it's sort of like we need to hold them to accountability and sort of call them out, change the language, change the regulation, and change the scale in which we consider what is successful as an innovation within this space.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes. Brilliant. We will move on to Elisa. So another kind of notable barrier is the gender data gap, which I'm sure you've all experienced in the work you're doing anyway, and just the lack of sufficient research. So Elisa, if she can hear me, so how did this impact your decision to create Flow Living?
All right. Well, I mean, I found it, like I said earlier, really shocking that, you know, when I was going through my own medical crisis, that there was no information about what to do, you know, and that I was part of this big cohort of women who were suffering from menstrual issues. I know today we're talking a bit about both. We're talking about the access to products, but for my side of things, it was also about, you know, getting correct care, and to see that can you guys hear me? to see that we were, in a position where there was no information about what to do was really eye-opening. And, I started digging into this, that, back in 1993, the NIH actually was so concerned about the fact that there was not enough, research being done in terms of including women into human clinical trials, that they actually put out a requirement, a mandate that you have to include women in studies. But when they did a sort of a check-in, an audit in 2015, there was basically no progress. And so, really, it's coming down to people like the founder of Quinn, who are saying, well, let's just make a product that's helpful in the diagnostic capacity to really change what has become this institutionalized gender bias in getting access to research and data that's going to help drive what first-line care should look like. And I think that, not only I love that the comment about the last innovation being about wings, adding wings to pads. There hasn't been much innovation in terms of caring for hormonal problems. The last innovation was the birth control pill, and as Abby pointed out many times, this is not a cure for what's wrong with your cycle. And we desperately need research to understand, how do women respond to, for example, medications differently at different phases of the cycle? How do women respond to different dietary inputs? How do they respond to different lifestyle inputs? How does that affect their hormonal well-being? And how does that create either states of hormonal health or contribute to menstrual disorders? And the reason why that's important, of course, is because menstrual disorders, having had one myself, really impact absolutely every aspect of your day-to-day life, whether that be during the time that you're bleeding or during the times that you're not. And we see this, for example, in women, famous women like Lena Dunham, whose endometriosis had been undiagnosed for about a decade, and that pain was so debilitating she had to miss lots of different engagements, to the point where she had to have the ultimate solution, because there is not enough research being done, of course, on endometriosis. The only ultimate solution that she had access to was to have her uterus removed at a young age, robbing her of her future fertility and putting her into early menopause. This is, and that's sort of still how we see the best course of action for menstrual disorders is, well, let's just remove the offending organ, aka the uterus, and then that should solve the problem. Whereas instead we should be asking the question, what has contributed to this system of the body to be breaking down, and what can we do to support it? And I think there's just this enormous wide open space just begging for more research beyond just the diagnostic piece, which is also totally lacking. We just don't have good tests for PCOS or diagnosing endometriosis. There isn't exactly a specific blood test, which is what part of the problem as to why women go so long without getting a diagnosis. But we also need to be doing research into what kinds of appropriate methods can we use to help resolve these issues for women, because the body is not designed to create all of these hormonal problems. It's designed to have a healthy, normal cycle. But we just really need a lot more research to help us understand how we can effectively do that.
Yes, thank you so much, Elisa. Everyone is kind of agreeing with you if you can't see that. But that was really helpful. And we will touch on that in one moment. I'll pass to Gurmeet to so obviously we've spoken about this gender data gap. A lot of the time when people try to close the gender data gap, they'll go naturally to, okay, well, we'll just make sure we have data on basically white women from certain countries, right? It's not giving you intersectionality into the gender data gap. So Gurmeet, particularly with the women you work with, have you noticed that women with disabilities or neurodiverse characteristics are overall left out in innovation around menstruation, like i.e. products that are available and friendly for people with disabilities, or just even participating in research?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that, because women with disabilities are almost always overlooked upon. Because when we think of these kind of issues or these kind of talks, we're only addressing, as they call, normal people. They don't want to look at anyone who has any disability of any kind. These are women, we're talking about, who don't who don't know anything about anything at all, let alone their body. So when I was there, one of the things that we noticed is women who have very heavy flow, a lot of products that are available in India are for regular cycle. There aren't that many products available for heavy flow, like in the U.S. And it's great that, you know, I live here, but the institution I work with is there. So I get to do a comparison of how much and what information we have here, and how much and how little of information is not available to them there. So we've got different kinds of, you know, when you look at your pads or your tampons, you've got lights, regular, super, super plus, ultra. There are like so many different levels of it. You don't get that there. So there are really just basic light and regular. There's no such thing as heavy. So how do you help these women who get heavy flows? Well, they put diapers on them. And that's one of the biggest expense also that goes towards this is, you know, women, a lot of these women are going through, you know, especially if they have any medical problems and they have heavy flows, which happens more often than not, they're just putting diapers on them. So I wish, you know, I know we have such a wonderful panel here and all these women are coming out with new innovative products to help people out there. I would urge if you can, or request, if you can also think of women who have disabilities, how can they deal with this? And if there is something that's more user-friendly for them, even for the staff when they take care of it, it's not easy to put a diaper on and off a person. You know, when you're trying to ask them to stand straight, and they really can, and they're so fidgety, so, or changing them. So it's definitely a challenge, and I wish there was a more broader market that also incorporated these women into their researches.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I think it's food for thought in terms of just, when people are innovating, creating these products, it's so easy to go for what will sell, what is the majority of people, without kind of, maybe looking elsewhere. So the next round we'll do a bit more quick fire.
And I'd love to add a little bit of
of course.
thought to that. I couldn't agree more. And actually, one of the most moving things that I remember from my time in medical school was a woman with disabilities. We had to do a pap smear on her. So, you know, undressing, speculum exam, putting on the table, very, very difficult to do. And we actually had to book an operation room and, you know, give her anesthesia to conduct this. And one of the things that is so sad about that is when I look at it today is like you have something as accessible as a menstrual pad. They're using menstrual pads anyways. Why not use that to make it accessible? But I also think when you think about the gender data gap, it is very important to think about how do we include minorities, how do we include women with disabilities and so forth. But we are thinking about, you know, an area of healthcare where women in general have not been included. It was mentioned that it wasn't even a requirement for women to be included in clinical trials until 1993. Even today, when we look at drug development, phase 1 trials are predominantly looking at male cells, right? What does that mean for the drugs that we develop? How do we make sure that the conclusions that we are arriving at when we think about diagnosis and symptoms that we look for when we diagnose patients, are they really representative of women? We think about women-specific conditions where we know that more women are dealing with these issues, as for example, chronic pain patients. We know that 70% of chronic pain patients are female, but only 20% of women that are included in chronic pain trials are women. So we are studying, you know, women predominantly sort of issues on a male biology, and that's a problem. So really, how do we solve that problem? How do we make sure that women are participating, are being represented, women of all kinds of, you know, shapes and forms, and how do we educate them? And I do think it comes back to the very first question you asked, Bethan, which is funding. Who is funding research? Who are designing those clinical trials? And are we making sure that they are including women and that women's health is prioritized in that, right?
Yeah, no, thank you. So as I was saying, quick fire round for this one, so that we can kind of get to the last bit as well, because I'm aware of the time. So we'll start with Abby. So we've addressed, and obviously we've spoken about kind of, the irregularities in menstruation. So We've addressed that the research into suppressing and manipulating menstruation and managing our fertility, but can you tell us why you think there has been less research into funding issues such as PCOS or endometriosis, which impacts 1 in 10 women who menstruate, and it still takes about 8 to 12 years to diagnose?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably it's just exactly what Sarah was saying, and she sort of pre-answered, you know, but I will say that, like, one of the things that's sort of shocking when I was researching for the business of birth control is that some of this research, and so many doctors will say this as well, you know, that when they're looking at a medical journal and they're looking at a study and then they look who funded the study, and they see that the drug company is funding this study. I mean, it is so, how do I say this? You know, I was just reading last night, there was a big article in the New York Times about the use of statins and how statins are so much more effective at lowering cholesterol than any supplements or any interventions. But then when you sort of dig deeper and you look in the comments, they're saying, oh yes, but the study you're referring to about the statins is funded by guess who, right? And so it's all kind of very insidious because that's who's informing the New York Times. And then the New York Times is printing the article telling everybody to take the statins. And so it is, you know, it really is like the rooster guarding the hen house, you know, in so many ways. And then here, you know, with what I show in my documentary is that, you know, the FDA is very collusive with all of this, and there's very little protection given. And the drug companies are able to really buy their way through and push their products through. And I mean, if we all didn't see this in the opioid crisis, then I don't know where, you know, where you can see it. But I mean, I do think that that is part of the problem, is if there is nothing to sell, if there is not a drug to push at the end of the research, then who is doing, you know, the research? And you're relying on the NIH or the, you know, to do this research, and it's you know, just very slowly turning.
Thank you so much. We will pass to, Elisa, who I know has, obviously she's mentioned how she's experienced with PCOS, and it's kind of a big reason behind her company. So, yeah, speaking of endometriosis and PCOS and other conditions, Elisa, can you tell us how tracking your menstrual cycle using an app like MyFlow has helped people self-diagnose or identify irregularities in their cycle?
Yeah, I think that's what's so exciting about menstrual tracking, at least for us at Flow Living, and why women love the MyFlow app that we designed, because that's what's so exciting about menstrual tracking. It goes beyond just, you know, understanding when you're ovulating and when you're menstruating. It's really about, you know, tracking patterns of symptoms. Because of this long diagnostic time to an actual diagnosis, and also because, like I said earlier, there's like lack of, you know, actual testing that can definitively pinpoint if someone is dealing with PCOS or endometriosis or other issues. That since that path is problematic for the practitioner, the medical provider, when a woman is tracking her symptoms, you know, and really looking at these patterns, she's able to really start to bring a lot more information to the conversation with her medical provider and push and advocate for herself around getting more testing more quickly, sooner in her journey. And I think that's really what the benefit is to really put the power of, you know, having this self-awareness in the hands of women themselves. I mean, and it was just really eye-opening to me that when I did this now, I think this was in 2013, I was the first human being to go on national television to show what the colors of your blood could indicate for your hormonal levels, right? We know if, for example, a woman is bleeding and it's light pink, that could indicate low estrogen levels. So we know that if it's very heavy and clotty. It could indicate excess estrogen, which has a whole host of other health ramifications. Even just tracking the patterns that a woman has with the color and consistency of her bleed can bring a lot of information to a conversation with her medical provider, which could help hasten her getting a diagnosis and potentially getting better care, of course, once the care is more researched and better funded, of course. But in the meantime, we're at Flow Living taking it upon ourselves to not only help them provide this kind of information, but also then to get them educated about what this could mean about their hormones and what they can do naturally to start to resolve these issues, to help the endocrine system function the way that it's designed to safely and effectively. And so again, it's really just about, tracking is a form of healthcare as long as you're tracking more than just when you're menstruating and when you're ovulating, if you start to track symptoms and other lifestyle issues.
Thank you so much. So yeah, we have minimal time left. I will pass over to, again, the pad industry experts, and then we'll close up kind of with what we want to request. So, I mean, when talking, and again, this can be more discussion-based if you want to kind of add to it, but when we're talking about menstruation or the innovation of menstruation in regards to products, people kind of assume that, creating the product is the hardest bit, but menstruation is largely, as we've mentioned, a taboo topic worldwide. So the European Commission, for instance, declared that it would tackle the top 10 polluters in Europe. Menstrual products were in the top 5, and they just didn't address it. Maybe, I don't know why. I guess they don't like talking about it, but it's obviously a big problem, and that would have been an opportunity to maybe invest into products like Floosh, like Sathi pads, etc. So yeah, I guess really quickly, but could you give us kind of an insight into how you tackle that taboo? And I guess this goes wider, not just to the pads, but also, to everyone.
So I think we've tried to tackle that taboo kind of on an individual level, like with consumers, but also, yes, I think with partners as well. So I think we've faced challenges since the beginning in terms of vendors not being interested to work with us in India, even to set up our manufacturing unit, because they wanted to know what we're going to make there. And then when they found out, they weren't so excited about that. And trying to kind of, I guess, talk a little bit more openly about the subject in general, and then also in that case kind of explain what good will come of this activity, and then slowly kind of warm people up to the idea. But I think there's different ways to kind of convince people, but unfortunately we have had to do a lot of convincing, I think, over the years. It has gotten, I think, a lot better as well, though. Like when we go to in-person events, which we've had a couple, we've seen a lot of change with people being more open to just talking to us about the product and not just running away when they see it's a pad. So, yeah.
Thanks. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Olivia.
Yeah, I think for us, it's really about changing the conversation from it being a taboo and negative. Everybody, oh, you have your period. Nobody's excited about that, really. But how can we change it into being something positive and really showcasing that this is really, really an opportunity? And I think we are behind. It comes from the very basics of what is menstrual blood, right? It's about publishing our data. It's about really making sure that even in the medical community, this is sort of a taboo and stigma. I do agree with you. I also am seeing sort of from the work that we are doing that it is changing. And I think the next generation, there is a level of pride almost in having your period, and they're sort of embracing it in an entirely different way. This is, of course, not the case necessarily globally yet. So, but I do think that it is really about start talking about our periods as something positive. And really, as women, we have this opportunity that men don't. Frankly, let's use it, and let's not treat it as a waste product. Let's figure out how we can make it a useful thing and a resource for women and for women's health.
Great.
I'll just be quick on this one. So how at Floos we want to help tackle this taboo is 2 ways: with education through functional language. We do a lot
I just
around
wanted to,
education of that
to jump
point.
in because, I couldn't agree more that we have to change the narrative, and that's so much of what my work has been on. How do we shift the narrative to seeing what is positive about the cycle? The whole cycle syncing method is really about in fact, how do we use our cycle to empower us, not beyond just feeling healthy, but in other ways. But I think, you know, it isn't just about only the change that is needed around seeing menstrual blood as waste product, because I couldn't agree more that that is so inaccurate. We have to start seeing it as this treasure trove of stem cells and information, and it's a powerful biomarker. But beyond that, we also have to change the narrative that we believe that, you know, menstruation itself is supposed to be painful, is supposed to be problematic, is supposed to be difficult, which is also not scientifically accurate. And so we also have to understand that that's not true. And then we have to go one step further. I think sort of these are three parts. We have to start to see that menstrual blood is valuable and not a disgusting waste product. Then we have to really understand that the narrative points and mythology are incorrect, just factually incorrect. And then third, we have to really understand that we can, in fact, manipulate our hormones and improve them pretty easily without medical intervention. And so that really starts to shift the relationship that a woman has to her cycle, to her hormones, to one of, oh, this is something I have to take care of myself, as opposed to the current experience, which feels, you know, that you're a victim to these mysterious hormonal forces that you can do nothing about or know nothing about. We need to be educated and informed with accurate information about the whole process, from the bleed to the care piece, so that we can really take charge of this issue.
Thank you. I don't know if Olivia, you wanted to quickly end your statement.
No worries, I'll just finish the point around education. I think something that was an educating both sides and everyone. So a big part, I'm very encouraged by the TikTok generation. I've seen that as a big part of our content creator program. We've encouraged everyone, from young boys and girls, to talk about menstruation, because I think raising partners, brothers, fathers, husbands who understand that as well would really help expand that education point. And to be honest, expanding that education into functional language also liberates some of the taboos that men have to face as well. There are no period bins within men's toilets, very understandably, but with the highlighting of the transgender community, there are men who menstruate, and therefore there is no accessible route for them to dispose of their products at all. And even those who are men who require some absorbent products for incontinence, again, there's no route for any disposal within your toilet. And so expanding this functional language, expanding taboo from just menstruation and less about, I wouldn't say isolation, but also highlighting of women, but also including that within the entire ecosystem is, I believe, a really important part to get everyone behind supporting innovation behind menstruation there.
Thank you. I'm going to let Abby and Gurmeet just kind of, you know, if you've got any calls to action effectively, to whether that's to nationally or internationally with the UN or any other bodies, but kind of what you think needs to happen in the next decade. Big question. I'll let maybe Gurmeet go.
Did you want to go? Oh, I was just going to say, just to actually echo exactly what Olivia said, I think education is the key. That's what I aim to do with my films, storytelling. I think personal stories are very, very powerful. You know, even just hearing, Gurmeet, about some of the women that you're dealing with, you know, it just opens your mind to who this affects that you're not thinking about every day. So, you know, I would say share these stories. And, you know, I think language is also a huge piece to keep this in the public discourse, to keep it out in the open. But yeah, for me, just, you know, I think as an activist and a storyteller, and I love what you said, Olivia, about opening this up to men. And I've noticed now more with my friends, they really educate even their very young boys. And they tell their boys, you know, this is what's going on. And, you know, and even my friend said the other day, her son saw her like taking chocolate, and he was like, oh, Mommy, you're eating chocolate. Are you getting your period? You know, because she's like, he understands at a very young age, and there's no taboo around it. And I think that's, you know, also a really, really huge point.
And I agree with your sentiments as well, as far as, you know, bringing the awareness through education is the biggest thing. In a country like India, the biggest thing is this is a topic that's just pushed under the rug. It's not something, as much as it's in the movies, it's out there in social media. It's still something, when you go and you see on-ground experiences and you talk to people, it's not something they want to talk about. And if you discuss it openly, you really are frowned upon, or the conversations just turn sideways into something else. So it's a big thing to start this dialogue, but it's also a trickle-down effect, I feel, where if the government starts initiating programs where they do get men involved to talk about it, it will make a difference to general public. A country where most of the government is run by men, it's a huge discouragement for these kind of topics to come down. And I hope that does change, because the government currently, as big as Pingalvada Charitable Trust Foundation is, government does not help in any way at all for anything. It's really just the hospitals and local volunteers that help out, and basic fundraising that they do. So I do hope that things change in coming future for the country and for women in India itself, where the conversation becomes more mainstream there.
Thank you. I know we're going to get kicked out soon. So thank you so much for people who attended. I know it was quite hard to get here for as early as you did. And a humongous thank you to all of the panelists for coming. A lot of you have traveled far. I hope you've learned a lot from this conversation. We will kind of hang around there if you want to network with any of them. But otherwise, thank you very, very much for being a part of the conversation.